Unbroken the Podcast with Madeleine Black, healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken the Podcast with me, Madeleine Black, where I'm speaking to people's stories that I've collected along my journey, people that have overcome adversity and are now bouncing forward in life, not just back. Today, I'm speaking to Colin Higgins. Colin Higgins is a relative newcomer to stand-up, but has been on the comedy scene for many years behind the scenes. Colin runs comedy club Jesters at Jimmy's in Park Bar, Glasgow, and has appeared in the documentary on Billy Connolly for BBC Two Scotland in 2020, titled Billy and Us. So welcome, Colin. Thanks for coming along onto my show. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. The first question I always like to ask all my guests that come on this show is what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Oh, I think I'm still, to be honest, figuring that one out as we kind of go forward. It's been a crazy time, and I think if you've had something traumatic in your past, that doesn't make you immune to life's challenges and difficulties, some of which are life-changing and traumatic in themselves. And so, it's been, I'm still climbing out that unbroken bracket, I think.
You're still working it out. So most people, when I ask them to give me a bio, I have to really shorten it. And you gave me an incredibly short bio, and it almost seems a little bit like you, that you hold back and you don't reveal too much of yourself. Would you say that was true?
Yeah, probably. I'm very open on stage when I'm talking about things, and I tend to drive my friends daft by talking about things and kind of whatever, but I maybe I hold back a wee bit. I don't know, so there's something to talk about, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Was there a time when you did feel broken?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So I know that you have been instrumental in the when you whistleblowed about two paedophiles that were actually killer paedophiles, and your evidence really put them away in prison.
It did, not the first time round. The first time round, I wasn't the first boy to give evidence. There was one boy before me, and then they folded. Donald Finlay, QC, realised what he was up against. And they folded and then pleaded guilty to the crimes they'd committed against that boy in particular, myself, and about another, I'm sure it was all in the double digits of other boys who'd been attacked by this pair, yeah.
Can you go back to the time when you were 14, when you met these two men?
Yeah, a very naive 14-year-old, given that, this is over 20 years ago. And I suppose, I haven't really changed in the fact that, somebody that can maybe communicate in the way that maybe I talk, maybe it sort of, I don't know, I'm quite confident with the way that I handle myself, but I don't, really have a clue what's going on. Or maybe that's just people, I don't know. But I certainly maybe came across as quite confident when I was 14, but I really was an idiot and didn't have a clue.
Well, it sounds like you were just a normal 14-year-old boy.
I think so. Yeah, maybe. Maybe, yeah, probably. Well, I had a fascination with Patsy Cline and Elton John. I don't know how, I'm not sure how standard 14-year-old that was, but yeah, I suppose. But I met this, I was in Largs, my parents, the marriage ended, and we moved to Largs to be closer to other family who'd moved through there. And
it's a seaside town for people that don't know Largs.
Largs is a very quite a famous wee place, quite a picturesque wee place. I don't hold much affection for it now, as you can imagine.
I could understand that.
But that's another one of my bête noirs. But I don't hold much affection for it now. But very beautiful place. And I would urge people to go and enjoy it because it's a lovely wee town. It's got Nardini's ice cream and it has ferry links to Millport and places like And we moved there, I think, when I was 12. And I finished, it was another school again. There's been a lot of schools in my life, a lot of moving house. I can't remember, I think I've been to maybe 7 or 8 different schools in my life.
Wow.
And my education really took an absolute battering with that, and obviously the trauma and everything that happened and what have you. It's only when you're older looking back you realise, Jesus. But yeah, we moved to Largs, finished the my primary schooling. I was still there. I was in, I think, first or second year I was in, or just this, during the start of second year. And I had friends that I'd made, and these friends had friends that they had who were kind of, older. They sounded like a fun pair of guys. I didn't know quite how much older they were, but I knew they had a
How
car.
much older were they than you, these two men?
I think about Charlie was, I think, about 40. Can't remember how old the other one was, to be honest. Younger than Charles. So I don't know, late 20s maybe.
But at the time, it seemed cool to hang out with these two older guys.
Yeah, well, these were very. I mean, obviously, they were a bit of a. I met them in the dark. I met them on the shore road of Skilmerley. The first time I met them, and I didn't know we were meeting them. I'd heard about them, but I didn't actually know we were meeting them. And they just kind of turned up when I was playing with my pals. And took us around in the car, and they had a little cottage they were renting on a farm. It all seemed very tame, but there was a farm road you can get a shot of the car on, and there was cans of beer and, joints getting smoked and things like that. And of course, we were kind of friends and frequenting this place with them, for a good couple of months before certainly there was any suspicion. I mean, there were obviously the police told me that I was possibly being groomed through another victim of abuse. You didn't even know what they were doing.
Okay.
And so it was quite sophisticated how it came about.
So they didn't just groom you by themselves, they got other victims to groom you as well.
I think that's how the police, tried to explain it to me. And I've only ever saw those lads as victims themselves, powerless, in the grip of these pair, who were very dangerous. And then when they started to explain who they were, O'Neill, the older one, used to be a professional boxer. He was a professional featherweight boxer. I think he was featherweight. And over in Australia, originally from Paisley, and then moved to Australia, where he got involved in all sorts of illegality, and apparently had tried to rob a bank. And he always told me this story about this security guard. He gave him a real hard time when he was in jail, and then he met him in a pub, and the guy didn't know who he was, didn't even recognise him, and apparently O'Neill took him outside and paralysed him and blinded the guy. And I just thought, when he was telling me these things, it was obviously all veiled threats of what he was capable of.
But what did you do when you heard these stories of violence?
Well, when you're 14 and you're talking to your pals, everybody's talking a lot of nonsense and everybody's exaggerating, and you just kind of take it as. I didn't think for a second I was sitting with somebody who was capable of doing that. And obviously I knew they were bigger than me, they were stronger than me, and the potential for them to harm me if they chose to was there, but I didn't think they ever would, and so there's all sorts of stories going around. And then they started telling me about a grass that they'd actually done in, and then subsequently they mentioned Alison. And I can't remember.
This is Alison McCarrick.
Yeah, this is really her story.
27, didn't she?
Yeah, I never met Alison, but my story is really Alison's story. and I'm a player in that story.
Yeah.
And she's the real hero of the piece because, you know, they killed her, and they did. This woman went missing.
And she was a 39-year-old mum, wasn't she?
She as a mum with quite a large family, 4 kids, I think. And
So they boasted to you that they had killed her because
yeah,
he was a threat to them, because she was going to speak out about something.
yes, that she was a grass. And I can't remember the timeline exactly. I can't remember, you know, it's so fragmented in my brain now, all these different parts of it, because I've really put my body through it since. You know, just with my dealing with the trauma of what happened, you know, you become very self-destructive. And so, you know, I really have pickled my brain with a lot of what went down. But they felt threatened by her, and they'd done it. And again, I honestly, it was said so nonchalantly, I did not believe them. It was beyond my comprehension as a wee boy who was actually quite religious. You know, my first experience of Largs was going to, there's a convent in Largs. My first experience of Largs was going on holiday in the October week and staying in a convent in the cottage at the back, and with my mum and my mum's best friend who was a singer, and she had the guitar. It was all very Dominica, Nika, you know.
You couldn't get more of a contrasting experience than when you met these 2 men who, not just to groom you, but abuse you as well.
Well, all these things had been implanted in my brain, that then they were dangerous. And then they started, you know, one morning I woke up, I was in a bedroom, which I thought I was in on my own. And I woke up and there was someone in the bed with me, and they were abusing me. And that was it. And then I was taken through to the other room and I was raped. And at the time, I didn't know if they were going to kill me. I didn't know what was going to happen. And, you know, that is very, very clear and vivid in my head. Obviously, all the abuse that happened after that was frequent. And then I realised I wasn't alone, because initially I didn't know if any of the other lads knew what was going on, or you don't, you know, your head is completely fried. You don't know what's happening.
So you discovered that they were abusing and raping the other boys involved as well.
And there'd been a history of it. And, you know, and then obviously there was other boys who were no longer in the kind of fold to where had been victims, and there was boys in Rothsay where they used to live who were victims, and there was victims all over Ayrshire. And yeah, and that was that, and that continued for another few months. And I think they were under the impression, I don't know, they definitely upped the ante when it came to threats, and they started threatening my mum's life. And one drunken stupor, O'Neill told me he was going to gouge her eyes out with a fork. My mum told me she'd been followed down the supermarket with this toupee, and I knew who it was.
And on hearing that your mum's life was now threatened, that did something to you, didn't it?
It pissed me right off.
Yes. But there
And
was real fear from what they had told you that they could literally gouge your mum's eyes out if they wanted to, or harm her in any way.
and I'd been too young to maybe notice that there was a missing person from the area. I hadn't registered. And then I started to see missing posters everywhere for this lady. And then I realised, oh my God, this is real, you know.
And they said about her that she's swimming with the fishes now, didn't they?
That was
disposing of her body in the sea.
That was how it started.
Yeah.
Oh, she's feeding the fishes and blah, blah, blah. And they would like hint and allude and stuff. I noticed O'Neill used to carry around like a little screwdriver, maybe that, you know, these little screwdrivers with a pen.
Yeah.
They're very sharp. And he had it, you know, and he kept it on him all the time. And he would tell me how, you know, if he was ever threatened, that this is what he would use to puncture a few holes in somebody's neck or whatever. And things just started to get more and more violent, and it was really, the abuse was horrific. You know, it was a difficult time. It really was. And I then decided there was a murder, another paedophile operating in Aberdeenshire somewhere, and he'd murdered a little boy. And I think tried to discard him in a rubbish bin at the bottom of flats. He'd murdered this little lad who was 9 years old. I decided that I had to go and tell someone, that I understood that if they were not free, if they were behind bars, we couldn't hurt anybody.
Yeah. So you were almost not worried about yourself, you were worried that they were going to carry on and do this to other people.
I was worried about my mum, and I knew that she was vulnerable. So she just met my stepfather kind of while this was all kind of going on.
Mm-hmm.
He worked in the rigs, he was offshore, so he's away for 2 weeks and then home. I had to take control of the situation, and
How old at this point?
I was still 14.
So you're still young.
Yeah, very young, and not really having a clue. There was no Facebook, there was no internet, there was no information, there was no help, there was nothing. I had a social worker because these guys were picking me up. My flat was right next to my school,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't even get to school. They were waiting for me outside, and they were literally lifting me off the street and taking me away. And it was like,
you were trapped by them, really, weren't you?
yeah, and very, no logic, no adult logic, just a very scared wee boy who felt totally complicit and guilty. I knew on some level that I was gay, and was quite ignorant as to, understandably so. I know I'm still quite hard on myself, and I need to check that occasionally. I'm still working through guilt and the shame and everything else. And the therapy I've had has been amazing, but it wasn't as, EMDR. I always get that mixed up. My dyslexia is terrible. Yeah, so you'll know all about that.
Yeah.
And it's hellish hard, but it does work. But there's still a lot of stuff I haven't.
Who was it that you spoke to when you decided you have to tell someone?
Yeah, I had to tell someone. So I had an aunt who lived in the town, who had a little child who was in primary one. That they'd let me know. They'd found out all about me. They knew who I was. They knew why I was there. They knew who was in my family. They knew who was vulnerable. All these people were never threatened directly, but it was always they let me know.
Mm-hmm.
They
knew
that who Emily, my wee cousin, was, and where she was going to school and all that kind of stuff. So I had to get rid of them. I had to get them out of the picture, And they threatened my mum's life. I thought, no. So I went to my aunt's house. The wee boy from Aberdeen, Scott Simpson, had been attacked and killed. And when I really needed the strength to speak, that story came on the TV, on the news. I bought his macaroni. Sorry?
Talk about synchronicity.
Yeah, I bought us both. I bought with my lunch money. I bought both my aunt and I macaroni cheese pies, and I sat down a macaroni cheese pie. Hope this will buffer the shock of what I'm about to tell you. And I started telling my aunt about the other boys, what happened to them, and my aunt just said to me, "You're telling me that you're aware of this. You've been in that environment, and that's not happened to you." I says, "Okay, it's happened to me too." And then that was it. I let it go. And
her reaction was just to come over and hug you and cried and...
Yeah, she jumped to she fell to her knees and grabbed me off the couch and just held me and burst out crying.
Yeah, it's really moving for me to hear that as well. There's the love and support, which is what you need when you're going to tell someone your most darkest, shameful secret.
Well, my uncle, he was working in Greenock, and she phoned him. I could hear her up the stairs, the absolute panic in her voice. The reality of how she was feeling when she phoned him, and he came rushing home, and he came in and sat on the couch. He burst out crying. And I remember him saying to me, I just don't know what to say to you, pal.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, you know.
Well, people want to make things better, don't they? And it was kind of hard to make things better.
Yeah, and I'm kind of numb. I'm Mr. Delayed Reaction.
And that would be the impact of the abuse makes you numb. You numb out so you're not aware of what's going on. That's really common reaction to what's going on. Numbing out so you don't feel, so you don't think. It's all part of it.
The other thing was because of the truancy from school, I had been assigned a social worker who, God love her, Mary, I'll not tell you a second, I need to reconnect with her. I'm going to be compiling a memoir hopefully next year, so I'm also in touch with one of the cops who took my original statement, who I remember his anger was so palpable and real, you know. He was the initial guy that took my statement, 2 guys. And there's so many rumours that go around, that went round the mill house about what was said and what happened with the Neil and other things that they had done. I've not got that clear yet. I'll need to go and speak to these people and find out. But yeah, Mary, the social worker who brought in for the truancy, I'd built up a relationship with her and I really liked her. She was a mature student who went into social work and was assigned a wee truancy case to get her started.
Okay, little did she know what was behind the
Little
truth.
did she know. She was going to be dealing with a case that was going to be, you know, very, very, it was going to be spread around the world at one point, and, you know, it was going to be linked in with the Madeleine McCann case and all of that. It's just crazy. But Mary was lovely, and I didn't want to speak to anybody else. And so Mary came on board and had to sit with me while I gave my statement step by step.
Police station.
Yeah. And I remember her, she used to drive an old Volvo. It was really old, cream Volvo. She called Vera the Volvo. And she used to pull me into that car and would sit and would have a cigarette. And I remember saying to the police, we need to stop, because I sat there in Kilburnie police station for 8 or 9 hours giving a statement.
It's a long time.
All in the one go. And of course, I wanted to get it out, and the police wanted to get this information. But Mary kept slowing the whole process down and saying, no, he needs a break.
Yeah.
And she says, Colin, do you need a break? And I says, obviously I did, but I just wanted to, you know what I mean? I said, no, I think I'm okay. And the police went, She said, well, I need a break, so we need to have a break. And she made sure I got my breaks, I got a wee juice, I got to relax. And she was amazing. And but I think she's also a mum and very clever, you know, and all of those things. She just became very protective of me, and I didn't allow my mum into the station while I gave my statement.
And is that to protect your mum?
Yeah. I just felt that I'd put her in such a terrible position. That it was.
Well, you hadn't put her in that position, they had put her in that position.
But
at the time you felt guilty, I understand.
Of course. And obviously she just started a relationship with this lovely guy who is still in her life and has been an amazing father to me and support when I've not been the easiest person to love. And there's times he could wring my neck, but I've got a fantastic relationship with him, and I'll forever be grateful. And we have a history, unfortunately, of moving house quite a lot, and maybe running away, I think, from things. I wanted out of Largs, and I really did. I didn't want to be there. The other lads who were all victims, who I obviously had to name, were holding that secret to themselves. They weren't talking to anyone about it. They were in control of it to a degree because they hadn't spoken about it. This is my interpretation anyway. Yeah,
but it would have affected them in some way, even though they're not speaking about it, because it's got to come out what we don't speak about. You know, it leaks out of us, really, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I think so. But I think, though, when I made them, I forced their hands to deal with that, and they didn't appreciate it at the time.
So you felt guilty about that as well?
I felt guilty about that as well. I felt afraid that I might end up getting a knife in the back. Paranoid. you know, about things. But obviously, I'm sure they realise that it was the right thing to have done.
And but it was during that time when you gave your evidence that you mentioned Alison to the police.
When I was given that statement, yeah, I went on. By the way, there's also along the lines of also I've got a murder to tell you about.
Because they really assumed that if there was no body, then there was no crime. It couldn't be pinned on them.
Well, that was the difference between Australian law and British law. O'Neill was very, very, well, he was, I suppose, when it came to things like that, he understood that we were kind of idiots that way.
Mm-hmm.
He would mock Scottish law. And when the last case that we had to deal with when I was 28, Dorothy Bain was cross-examining him, and that really annoyed her. And I was in the witness kind of box stand when she was reading all that out, you know, and yeah, we couldn't, you know, no body, no crime, and it took us a long time to go after them again for the murder. So we got them done for the abuse and the attacks on us.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a few other cases after that because of course they got out in about 8 years or whatever. First time offenders or whatever, and they must be involved in some network involved and whatever. They seemed to be very mobile and had access to funds after they left jail. But that's another thing. That's another story altogether. Then they went over to the continent and started attacking people over there. And that was why they got involved. They were suspects in the Madeleine McCann case.
They were over in Spain and Portugal, weren't they?
They were over, yeah, and they were operating a cleaning service for apartments for holidaymakers called the Rainbow Cleaning Service, where they were mixing with vulnerable kids and families. And so you go through all that. You give up your life is destroyed. You know, obviously any aspirations I had to be a musician or a comedian, that was very important to me since I was a toddler.
Mm-hmm.
But how can I do any of that now? I can't do that. I can't be exposed and people understand and know who I am and have this in my history. How will that work? You know, and then you subsequently learn that all comedians, without exception, are completely mental and have all sorts of crazy stories about their lives.
I think a lot of people, not just comedians, have crazy stories about their life. We all have stories. So despite being terrified, thinking you'll never do it, you did take the plunge and you do stand up on the stage and you do stand-up comedy. To me, I could think
not anymore.
It's scarier.
I do it in here now.
Oh, well, that's it. At home now, you have your own little office at home.
On Zoom. There's no gigs anymore.
But the very first time, tell us about your first gig when you stepped out onto the stage.
Oh my God, the first gig I did was in 2009 and it was at the Stand in York Place in Edinburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was going through a kind of tricky relationship at the time, and it was a bit of a nightmare, that gig. I just literally walked on stage and made it up as I went along and talked about a rather rambunctious, that a word?
A good word.
Yeah, sort of, it was like Halloween time and we'd been out to a kind of gay Halloween party in Glasgow and it all went a bit tits up. And my partner at the time and I both get lifted for having a tete-a-tete.
Okay.
And that was on the Saturday, that was the Sunday night, which meant we get lifted and then went to court. It was so embarrassing on the Monday morning. And we're admonished straight away, you know, the two of us were as bad as each other. And but yeah, there's nothing worse than sobering up when you're having a shower with a guy with one eye, you know, and in the morning. And it was the only time that's ever happened to me. Anyway, I had my first gig on the Monday, so that was the Sunday. Then I had to travel through to Edinburgh for the gig on the Monday, and it went okay. I remember her saying to me, the MC, saying, "Do you want me to tell the audience that you're new?" And I said no. So I went on stage and I just spoke about getting lifted and going to and spending the night and Tory Glen Cells it was, next to Asda. Spent the night in there, having to go to court in the morning. My sister having to pick me up, my pregnant sister picking me up. God bless her. On the Monday morning, and then going and doing that gig. And then that was it. And unfortunately, I tried to start gigging, and that relationship ended, but I still kept trying to do it, but I just didn't know. I didn't know a comedian. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I hadn't a clue. When you start in comedy, you really start without an absolute clue of what to do next.
There's no manual.
Well, when there is now, you can go, like, you've got Viv G and Des McLean, and they do courses, and I've done them both, actually, and they're great. You know, Viv is just amazing. It's a talent teaching comedy in of itself. You need somebody that will listen to you and understand who you are up there and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to convey. And
but at the time when you started out, you had no idea. But you
no
applied to help at in Edinburgh Festival, I believe, at the Jamie Godley show.
But what happened was that, and then I then was on the train going to a gig in the Stand in Glasgow, I think 2010, and I'll never forget this. I was in the front carriage, and I was determined. I used to drink and take drugs and go be crazy, and I decided I wanted to do the gig sober. So I had a big bottle full of coffee to give myself a buzz. And I'm on the train drinking this coffee, and we're driving. I was living in Prestwick at the time, and we got on the train to head into Glasgow, and I'm meeting my friend in Central Station, who incidentally works for the British Transport Police.
Okay.
She's a copper, right? We've been friends since we were children, and I'm going to meet her. But before we got into Paisley, at Milliken Park, there was just a shudder on the train, and I could feel like this snappity snap under my feet. And I thought, my interpretation in my head, I thought, we just ran over a tree. I thought, kids have went down and put branches over the track, and we've crunched through it. And the train grinded to a halt, and the driver came out absolutely, devastated. And I went, oh my God. And he told us that he'd hit somebody.
Oh.
So I went, right. He went, please tell me there's something stronger than coffee in that bottle. And I said, no, mate. I went, I don't think you should maybe drink anything. Anyway, I said, I just assumed it would come and breathalyse him or whatever. Turns out that's not the case. But anyway, the train, I was shocked. The train had ploughed through a young boy, he said. And then the train was then, they pulled us into Milliken Park, got off the train, and it was a devastating scene with the train, as you can imagine. And just the smell in the air and blood and all that. It was a really shocking image. It seared into my brain. And I missed the gig. And I just thought, somebody's trying to tell me something somewhere. I just felt so traumatized that another young life had been I'd been in part of another young life being obliterated. It was just such a real head fuck, pardon the French. And I didn't do it again. I didn't stop writing, and I kept in contact with some great people from the comedy scene who were encouraging. I was still getting offered gigs here and there, open spot gigs. I didn't do any of it, and then my mental health got so bad, I took a massive overdose, and I had to go back to court to deal with the murder because of the Arlene Fraser case. We'd managed to get a conviction, and without there being a body, with Arlene Fraser, I think another one, and I knew then that that was going to be the green light for us to then take them to court again, and then I had to go back, and this time there was no pleading guilty to murder, so we had to go and we had to give evidence at that, and I was actually in when I was 15, the first court case, I took a massive overdose and then ended up in an adult psychiatric hospital because there was no room for me at a children's one.
And you were a child?
I was 15 and I was in Park Ward in Ailsa Hospital, which is an assessment ward. So I wasn't in like the bouncy castle, as the staff used to lovingly refer to it, which was the real IPCU. section of the hospital. I was in the sort of assessment ward area, and while I was in, and it was terrible, you know, it was like, you know, because I was a child, they weren't letting me smoke, they weren't letting me, and I was just like, you know, so it was very difficult. And there was a paedophile in there with me at the same time who was trying to evade, sort of, because he was in hospital, they couldn't approach him, or he was trying to manipulate the law. But I was looked after in there by a young guy who was had a problem with addiction, and was a heroin user. And he was a sweetheart, and he looked after me in there. And he went, "Don't you worry about him."
So he protected you.
Yeah, and I felt safe in that. But it was really wrong. Oh, there's so many things about that. You know, this is why I think the book, it's important that I do write something down.
Absolutely.
And I focus on all of that. I've talked about it on stage and some of the characters that I've met, but
it was one of the questions I was going to ask. Do you joke or talk about abuse when you're doing your stand-up? Is that something we can laugh at? Because I know Jamie Godley does. I've seen her many times, and she does talk about being abused and the murder of her mum, and she laughs about it.
She does, but Janie's very, 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 very skilled at what she does, and I do talk about it, but I don't maybe go on about it maybe as frequently. But Janie can talk. Janie's got an established fan base who know her, so she can allude to it quite skillfully, put the audience at ease.
And her book is out. Her book has been out for a long time, doing handstands in the dark, so people know her story as well.
She actually told me not to read it, and I remember she told me about the book, and I haven't read it. I haven't read yours either.
That's okay.
I didn't want to read all about you and then speak to you. I would rather speak to you and then go and read. I've been reading lots of stuff.
You don't have to read it, it's fine.
I'm reading all sorts of books, and I only started reading in my 30s. I was never a reader. I think I'm dyslexic. There's something wrong.
Well, there's also audiobooks as well. It's never too late to start reading.
No, well, Marion Scott, she actually, who looked all the stuff in the press and all that. When you say joking, I had to joke about it when STV were filming in Park Bar where I run Jesters. I did allude to it, but it's like, as Billy Connolly said, there's no colder topic on earth
that we can't.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's true. But I think when people understand that I've come through and I'm okay-ish at the other side of it.
You are okay. It's just for you to really accept that and acknowledge that. You're more than okay. And I'm wondering, you know, we called this episode Laughter is the Best Medicine. Has the comedy and the laughter saved you? Has it really helped you?
Oh, God, yeah. Because you asked me to prepare things that I was... to talk about things
that have helped you. Yeah, we always kind of at the end we ask for a few tips from you.
Oh, that's
okay.
Well, you know, it has helped. It's talking, it's expressing yourself, and I've got a real problem with being misunderstood, and I'm pretty sure that's probably my fault.
What do you think people don't understand when you say you're misunderstood?
I don't know if I think for a comedian I'm maybe not the best with context. When I'm speaking on social media or whatever, and people I don't think quite get the tone behind what I'm saying, and when I'm being ridiculous, I like being absurdly angry about things. A good energy when you're on stage or on social media, and I have bad days and I rant and I rave. But you just, I think, because when you live with something every day, and people don't realise, my partner does realise, and he's now aware of the fact that when I sigh, usually if I'm going through and I still have PTSD, I still do zone out, I still do have flashbacks. And there's
you are aware now of them as well, and you've been taught good coping strategies from your therapist.
Yeah, TG, as I call her, gave me fantastic, a battle-weary therapist. She was amazing.
And isn't it great how life sends us the people that we need?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it's been certainly in comedy. If it hadn't been for the women of Scottish comedy, and now subsequently I've had help from and real support from guys like Stu Henderson, who is a retired comedian now, but very still quite active on social media, and great with advice. He does all my posters for me. Oh, sorry, I'm having a problem here with my computer. Okay. He does help me with social media and my posters for jesters and things. Very supportive. Des McLean, very supportive, and helping me with Zoom and everything else. Amazing talent. But it's really been the women in Scottish comedy who have really helped me. You know, Janie obviously by taking me into her immediate circle and showing me how the fringe works, showing me how to be an absolute shit-hot comedian.
Next year it will be back on, and I will come and see you. I'll be the first to buy a ticket.
But I think there's all sorts of rumours. I don't like to see what the rumours are because it's nonsense. But there's all sorts of fear going around that we're not even going to be back in. It's going to be 2022 before the fringe, which I think is utter crap.
Let's not depress ourselves and think about that. So what I really love about you is that, yeah, you had a really awful experience and you didn't go to court not once but twice, but thankfully these two men are now inside, charged with murder and over 30 offences. And you're very honest, you know, you do say, I still struggle, I still have bad days, but I'm still here and I'm still laughing. So now that we are nearing to the end, can you give me your 3 tips that have helped you, or a few tips that have helped you to get that?
Comedy has always helped me, but the 3 things that have helped me, and obviously like my partner and my friends and my family, I'll put them as one thing.
So good support.
Good support. It's not always been the right support. They've not, you know, it's not always been perfect, because it's an extraordinary thing to try and help somebody through, and I now realise how unqualified I was to deal with it, you know, and you forget the impact it has on the people around about you that love you as well, and it was traumatic for them. It
is a ripple effect. I obviously know that very well.
And obviously I lost my sister last year. We're coming up on the year anniversary of losing my sister at 40, which was just an absolute nightmare. But we're still, you know, trying to support each other and get on with it. The family has been, and my friends and obviously my partner have been amazing. Therapy has been a game changer.
Well, as a therapist, obviously, I would tend to agree with you.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine you'd be an amazing therapist. I'm quite the expert on good. If you walk in, there's a phrenology bus sitting behind them, you think, oh, for Christ's sake.
You know, I think all it takes is to be real, just to be a human. You don't have to be perfect. You just, and you don't have to have had the same experience, but you just need to be alongside someone and just care for them. And that's all you can do, is hold them kind of emotionally and support them.
I mean, EMDR therapy is traumatic.
Yeah.
It's hellish, hard, and it's amazing. But the process of getting it all together is very healing, and just having somebody like yourself who goes, right. And I remember we were speaking the last time. A couple of times you went, I'm going to be a therapist head on.
I haven't done that today.
Right, you need to stop saying that. That's, you know, and I'm still aware that I'm still in these old patterns and. Wow. Anyway,
you're aware, so that's really good. That's all part of the journey, isn't it?
It's half the battle, I think, if you're aware of it. And obviously, comedy is great when it goes well, and people are laughing.
And when I do stand on the stage and speak, but to go out and make them laugh, oh, that would really terrify me.
I find people say it's the hardest job in the world, and I don't know if that's quite right. You know, it's not brain surgery, or you know, but it is. It can be tricky if it's an audience that don't really want you there. You know, it can be hard.
But all the things that I've read about you and the videos that I've watched, the thing that really stands out for me is when you say, "When we laugh, we win."
Yep.
And that's
my mantra.
That's just it. I just think that is a perfect, hopeful place to end our interview today, because when you laugh, you win. And you are winning. Even though you have setbacks and you have struggles every day, you're still laughing, and that's living. That's it.
I couldn't agree more.
So I just want to really thank you so much for coming on Unbroken the Podcast with me today. If people want to find out more about you, how can they find out about you?
They'll get me on. I'm on social media, so Colin G Higgins. There's another 3 Colin Higginses. I don't know how you pluralize my name either. there's another 3 in my hometown. So I've got Colin G Higgins on Facebook. I've got a comedy page set up as well. There's Instagram and Twitter if you want to say hello. And hopefully we'll be back gigging soon. And if anybody's struggling and looking for any inspiration, a good book I wanted to recommend is this one.
Yep.
It's No More Silence by David Whelan. Yep. And it was also written, he helped compile it with Marion Scott, who's looked after me in the press and things like that.
Is Marion going to help ghostwrite your book too, or are you going to write your book yourself?
I'm still working out how the book's going to be. If it's going to be I was born on May the 21st, blah blah blah, but it's just going to be a memoir specifically on what happened, with alluding to the past. And I don't know how it's going to take form yet, but Marion knows our onions, so she'll be. A book that I've read recently as well that I absolutely loved is by Damien Barr. Who, are you aware of Damien?
Yes.
Damien's from Muir Hill, just up the road from me, and he grew up in Lanarkshire and had a troubled start to his life, and things were difficult. And growing up, he's a bit older than me, but it was brilliant, very witty, and very well read. So those are my books.
And a common thread with all of these books and yours is speaking out, is ending the shame, is ending the stigma, because the shame was never yours anyway.
Yeah, and we seem to think paedophiles are otherworldly kind of monsters, and they're not. They're people who are, and I don't believe in evil. I don't believe in evil people, but I do think people, for whatever reason, if it's chemical or if it's been an environment thing or nature or nurture, and they do very evil things. But I don't believe in inherent evil people. But I certainly met two very disturbed individuals who did some really evil things, and obviously Alison paid with that, with her life and her children and the grandchildren she's never met. And I live with Alison every day, and it's been so frequent since I've spoken to the press, and I'm doing things and I'm speaking about what happened. Yeah, I do think about her because I'm now the same age, nearly, that she was when she died, and it's heartbreaking.
But without you, they would never have known what had happened to her.
Or, well, I don't know if that's true, but
you were very instrumental in uncovering the truth.
Oh, I think I'm public enemy number 1 with those two, because I'm the reason that things kicked off. But it's Alison's story, and she's the real hero. If she hadn't went through what she went through, would I have suffered that and not said anything? What would it have went on further?
Well, we don't know, because that's not what happened. So we have to end it where it did happen. So don't get caught in wondering. But anyway, thank you again for coming to the show, and I wish you all the best with everything.
Thank you so much.
See you.
Unbroken the Podcast with Madeleine Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken the Podcast with Madeleine Black.